Hello, students! In our last class, we were discussing industries that use raw materials from agriculture, things like cotton or sugar. Today, we're going to look at something a little different. We'll be talking about industries that depend on minerals, materials that are taken from deep within the earth. So here is our plan for today. First, we will clearly understand the difference between industries based on crops and those based on minerals. Then we will spend a good amount of time on the iron and steel industry, which is a very, very important industry. We'll also take a look at how steel is actually made. After that, we'll learn about another key metal, aluminum. And to finish, we'll have a quick recap of everything. Okay, so let's start with a very simple and basic idea. One of the easiest ways to classify industries, to group them, is by looking at what kind of raw materials they use. On one side, you have your agro-based industries. The name itself, agro, comes from agriculture. So these industries use raw materials that come from farms, like cotton for clothes, sugar, and edible oil. Simple, right? But on the other side, and this is our focus today, we have mineral-based industries. These industries use minerals and metals, things that are dug out from the earth, as the raw materials. Good examples are iron and steel, cement, and aluminum. So let's be very clear on this definition. Please pay attention. A mineral-based industry is an industry that uses minerals and metals as its primary or main raw material to manufacture goods. This is a very key concept for our lesson today. All right, now let's talk about a very important mineral-based industry. You could even say it's the king of all of them. I'm talking about the iron and steel industry. It is often called the backbone of all other industries, and we're about to find out why. Just take a moment and think, why is steel so important? Look around you. The fan on the ceiling, the frame of your window, the bus you take to school, the huge buildings in our cities, all of them need steel. It is used to make all kinds of machinery, for construction, for transport, for our country's defense, and for so many consumer goods we use every single day. And this is exactly why we call the iron and steel industry a basic industry. Now, what does this term mean? Well, a basic industry is an industry whose finished products are then used as raw materials by many other industries. You see? A steel plant makes steel, and then a car company uses that steel to make a car. A construction company uses that steel to build a bridge. So the steel industry provides the basic material for so many others. This brings us to a very important point. It is often said that the amount of steel a country produces and consumes is an index, or a measure of that country's development. Just think about it. The more developed a country is, the more cars, buildings, and factories it will have. And all of these things need steel. So more steel means more development. Now here is another key term that we need to learn. The iron and steel industry is also known as a heavy industry. And why is that? Well, the reason is actually very simple and literal. Both the raw materials, like iron ore, and the finished products, like steel bars, are very heavy and bulky. This means that transporting them from one place to another costs a lot of money. And that's why we call it a heavy industry. So we know that steel is very important. But have you ever wondered how it's actually made? How do we turn a rock like iron ore into strong steel? Let's have a look at the process. It's a bit like baking a cake. You need the right ingredients, and you need them in the correct proportions. So these are the main ingredients. First, of course, is the iron ore. Then we need coking coal, which is a special kind of coal that produces a lot of heat. We also need limestone, which is very important because it acts as a cleaning agent to remove impurities. And finally, a small amount of manganese is added to make the steel hard and strong. Now, this is a very important fact to remember. The proportion, or ratio, in which these materials are mixed is very specific. It's approximately 4:2:1. That means 4 parts iron ore, 2 parts coking coal, and 1 part limestone. Please try to remember this ratio. Okay, let's walk through the process step by step. First, all those heavy raw materials are brought to the plant. Then the iron ore is put into a huge furnace, called a blast furnace. There, it is melted using the heat from coking coal, and limestone is added to clean it. What comes out is molten iron, which we call pig iron. But this isn't steel yet. This pig iron has to be purified further. After purification, we get steel, which is then shaped into final products like sheets and bars. All right, here's a little question for you to think about. We've just learned that this is a heavy industry and that transportation costs are very high. So if it was your decision, where would you build a steel plant to make things most efficient? What is the most logical location? Just think for a moment. Did you think about building it close to where the raw materials are found? If so, you are absolutely correct. It just makes logical sense, doesn't it? And that is exactly why, in India, most of our major iron and steel plants are concentrated in one area, the Chotanagpur Plateau region. So why this particular region? What's so special about the Chotanagpur Plateau? Well, it offers many advantages. First, high-grade iron ore is available here at a low cost. Second, all the other raw materials are also found nearby. This greatly reduces the cost of transportation, which, as we know, is a major challenge for heavy industry. Add to that the availability of cheap labor and a huge domestic market for the steel, and you have the perfect location. Okay, so now we have a good understanding of the iron and steel industry, our example of a basic and heavy industry. Let's take a small pause. Now we're going to move on to the second most important metallurgical industry in India, aluminum smelting. Aluminum has some truly amazing properties. For one, it's very light, which is why it is used to build aircraft. It is also resistant to corrosion, meaning it doesn't rust. It's a very good conductor of heat, and that's why many of our kitchen utensils are made of aluminum. It's also malleable, meaning it can be easily beaten into different shapes, and when it's mixed with other metals, it becomes very strong. So where does this aluminium come from? Well, the raw material for aluminium is a bulky reddish-colored rock called bauxite. Now look at this conversion. It takes about 4 to 6 tons of bauxite just to produce 2 tons of an intermediate substance called alumina. And from those 2 tons of alumina, we finally get only 1 ton of aluminium. So you see, a very large quantity of raw material is needed. So, what are the most important factors for the location of an aluminum plant? There are 2 main ones. First, you need an assured source of the raw material, bauxite, at a low cost. But the second factor is extremely critical. You need a regular and cheap supply of electricity. The process of making aluminum, called smelting, uses a huge amount of electrical energy. It is so important that for this metallurgical industry, electricity is almost considered a raw material in itself. All right, we have covered quite a bit of ground today, from heavy steel to lightweight aluminum. So before we end, let's just do a quick recap of the main points. So what did we learn today? First, we saw that industries can be classified as either agro-based or mineral-based. Then we understood that the iron and steel industry is a basic industry and also a heavy industry, and that it's crucial for a country's development. And finally, we learned about aluminum, a light and versatile metal whose production requires a very, very large amount of electricity. And now I will leave you with a final thought. Just look around you, right where you are sitting. Can you spot at least 3 things that are products of the mineral-based industries we discussed today? I'm sure if you look carefully, you will find many. That is all for today's lesson. Thank you.